I saw it 7 minutes before my birthday began, a Facebook post glowing on my screen like a quiet explosion. A surprise party for our shining star Lila Ellery, the only one worth celebrating. One photo stopped my breath. My sister's grin, her hands on the laptop I'd spent 18 months saving for. Around her, my parents beamed. Around me, the world tilted. How far would you go to reclaim your worth after a lifetime of being forgotten? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to us. We always appreciate the time you have with us. It was 12:43 p.m. when I saw it wedged between a coworker's engagement photo and an ad for ergonomic keyboards. My thumb froze mid-scroll, the screen glowing like a trap I'd stepped into too late. There on my parents' page was the caption that stopped time. A surprise party for our shining star, Lila Ellery, the only one worth celebrating. The words bled into the air like something toxic. The post was timestamped 11:53 p.m. Last night, 7 minutes before my birthday began. My eyes drifted over the photos, the rented rooftop with fairy lights, the tower of macarons, the faces turned toward my sister with champagne smiles. Lila stood in the center, a hand to her chest, the other in mid-wave, the practiced pose of fake surprise she'd perfected since middle school. And there it was, on the table beside her, a silver laptop with the same etched logo I'd spent 18 months saving for. I didn't need to zoom in. I recognized the model by heart, the XPS 17 with the i9 chip, the one I'd bookmarked and checked on sale every payday. The office noise around me blurred into static. The hum of printers, the soft clack of keys, the coffee machine sputtering, all of it dimmed as if someone had pressed mute. I felt the air thin my pulse echoing in my ears. I put my phone face down on the desk before my hands could shake hard enough to drop it. My cubicle walls were the same gray they'd always been, but the light looked sharper now, almost cruel in how normal it remained. Bathroom, I muttered, standing too fast. My chair rolled back into the partition with a dull thud. No one noticed. They rarely did. The fluorescent lights in the restroom flickered overhead as I gripped the cold porcelain sink. My reflection stared back 31 hair, pulled into a low twist that tried to look effortless, eyes too tired for my age. My name badge read, Grace Ellery, Product Operations Analyst, though right now it might as well have said invisible. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The tears burned behind my eyes before I could stop them. The first slipped free, tracing a black streak of mascara down my cheek. I wiped it away with the side of my thumb, smudging the evidence like I'd been taught to do with every slight, every forgotten moment. Everything okay in there? Kara's voice floated through the door. Fine, I called too quickly. Just a minute. When I looked up again, my reflection had steadied, same woman, but her eyes were sharper. The tremor was gone from my jaw. I knew this feeling. It was the quiet before something broke. The memories rose on cue, uninvited, but rehearsed me at 16, stirring spaghetti sauce with one hand while solving algebra problems propped against the sugar canister. Lila sprawled on the couch beside Dad, controller in hand, shrieking victory as she beat another video game level. Mom cheering her on like it mattered. Dinner's ready, I'd said. 5 more minutes, Dad answered without looking up. The sauce had burned that night. My homework hadn't gotten done. Then the auditorium rows of empty seats when I accepted the award for my senior speech competition. A handful of polite claps from strangers. The text that came 5 minutes later. Sorry, honey, Lila wasn't feeling well. We'll celebrate later. Later never came. But 2 weeks after at Lila's school play, they'd shown up an hour early with flowers, taking front row seats and leading the standing ovation. Our little star mom had said again and again as if the phrase was sacred. The bathroom mirror fogged slightly from the building's uneven ventilation. I pressed my palms flat on the counter, the edge biting into my skin just enough to ground me. I looked at myself the way you look at someone you're meeting for the first time. The faint lines around my eyes, the steadiness of my shoulders. I looked older than I felt, but in that moment, something younger inside me, the obedient child, finally went still. I returned to my desk and sat spine straight. Kara glanced up, concern flickering in her expression. I smiled, small, practiced, perfect, and she returned to her spreadsheet. The screen of my monitor lit up, casting a pale reflection of my face as I opened a new tab. My cursor hovered over my banking app. I didn't know why I was doing it, only that I needed to see. The numbers appeared in neat, indifferent rows, each transfer, each temporary payment. My sister's rent, her car insurance that time. Mom said she'd handle it next month, but never did. I traced them backward like footprints leading to the start of a pattern I'd ignored too long. A sound drew my eyes upward. Someone was laughing by the coffee machine, loud, carefree. I envied that sound. I'd forgotten what it felt like to laugh without permission. My gaze landed on the small orange bear keychain hanging from my monitor. The color had faded to dull amber after years of thumb fidgeting through tense phone calls with family. Lila had given it to me at a carnival when we were 8. There'd been a pink one and an orange one in the prize bin. "You can have the ugly one," she'd said, clutching the pink bear to her chest. "Mom, tell her orange is ugly." And Mom, without missing a beat, had smiled and said, "Well, she doesn't mind, do you, Grace?" I'd said no, because back then saying no to anything felt impossible. The bear dangled, now worn bald in spots, its eye half loose. It had always been my talisman, the symbol of hope, that one day if I gave enough, tried enough, waited long enough, they'd see me. But sitting there under the buzz of fluorescent lights, surrounded by the quiet tapping of people living their own lives, I felt something shift, a slow, seismic crack inside me. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was realization. I reached up and unhooked the keychain from the monitor. The tiny metal ring snapped softly, like a thread breaking. I turned the bear in my palm, its rough texture scraping my skin. It didn't feel like comfort anymore. It felt like evidence. My phone buzzed once on the desk, probably a notification from some group chat, maybe even theirs. I didn't look. I couldn't. Instead, I whispered it aloud, the words tasting strange but steady. "No more." The sound filled the small cubicle, quiet but absolute. I lifted my head and met my reflection in the dark monitor, eyes red but clear, jaw set. For the first time, I didn't look like someone waiting to be chosen. I looked like someone about to choose herself. It started with a login and a dare. I clicked into my bank account and felt the room tilt, as if the numbers could rearrange my life by themselves. The dashboard loaded clean fonts, cheerful blues, so polite about the damage. I opened the transfers tab and set the range to 3 years. Rows appeared like a marching band, each payment keeping time. $750. $300. $120. Notes. Rent D. Whitaker. Car repairs. Medical bills. Groceries. Urgent. The list went on until the page had to paginate, like even the site was tired of accommodating. I exported the data to a spreadsheet so I could see it all at once. Columns snapped into place. I added a sum formula with the same muscle memory I use for quarterly reporting. The total pulsed at the bottom right as if the cell itself had a heartbeat, $36,120. I stared until the numbers blurred. That was 3 winters of rent in my neighborhood, or at least a down payment on the kind of life I kept telling myself I wasn't ready for. I clicked into individual entries. Rent D. Whitaker neatly, reliably, on the 1st of every month, 36 times. He'd always been cordial on the phone, his voice walnut smooth, the kind used for reading fine print. "We appreciate your consistency, Ms. Ellery." He'd say it like praise. I'd hear it like a leash tightening. Next line, brake pads, rotors, $480. Starter replacement, $692. Emergency dental, $340. Copay urgent care, $90. Medication out of pocket, $118. Each entry wore the costume of necessity. Some were real, I'm sure. Enough were not. I swiveled in my chair and looked at the coat hanging on the wall. Hook navy wool elbows faintly shiny where threads had thinned from winters of bus stops and walking too fast. I'd sewn the inside pocket twice. In the break room, my microwavable meals sat stacked like bricks, 4 for $12 flavors that promised comfort and delivered salt. My sneakers had a hairline crack near the toe where the rubber met the sole. My life was practical to the point of erasure. Out of habit, I opened Instagram and typed my sister's handle. There she was, glossy as a magazine spread. Lila at a tasting room in Napa lipstick the color of pomegranates. Lila laughing over oysters on crushed ice. Lila with a tote whose designer name was stitched large enough to read from space. In one photo, she stood beside a convertible that wasn't hers, but the caption didn't correct the assumption. Weekend reset, she wrote, as if time off were a birthright, as if Monday mornings didn't belong to anyone who made her comfort possible. I toggled back to the spreadsheet and added a new column labeled, What This Could Have Been. In the first cell, I typed condo deposit and let the ghost of the idea breathe. I have a notifications folder of listings I've never toured, modest one-bedrooms, with light that slants across hardwood like a blessing. I calculated even a small deposit would have put me within reach. In the second cell, I typed travel fund and thought of the places I'd studied in high school, textbooks, the cliff paths in Ireland, the dull gold of late afternoon in Savannah, the particular blue of Puget Sound from a ferry. In the third cell, I wrote freedom and left the amount blank because it didn't fit inside currency. My phone buzzed with a new message. I didn't check it. Instead, I reached for the orange bear keychain on my desk, the one I had unhooked from my monitor earlier. It sat in my palm like a small, ridiculous witness. Its fur was balding, one plastic eye cloudy with scratches. When Lila gave it to me at that carnival, she kept the pink bear and told me orange was ugly. Mom had agreed sweetly, as if ugliness were a benign fact and not a sentence. I had carried this thing through years like a mascot for second place. I set the bear beside the spreadsheet and felt the pivot happen quiet as a breath drawing itself in. The math could only tell me what I had lost. The bear told me why. I scrolled to the earliest transfer 3 years and 1 day ago, the first temporary rent payment. I remembered the call, Lila sobbing, Mom pleading Dad, promising it would be a bridge. Bridges, it turns out, can run across your back. I took a pen and wrote the total on a sticky note, $36,120. Then I wrote it again, beneath, adding context the way a scientist labels a slide, 3 years. 36 rent payments, discretionary emergencies. Then I wrote a single word under it, enough. On another tab, I opened a mortgage calculator and played pretend. If I'd saved that amount paired with the savings I did have, I could have qualified for a tiny place with a balcony. A spot for a plant that wasn't dying from lack of sun. I plugged in rates, downgraded expectations, moved the slider until my chest stopped hurting. The number was still in reach if the bleeding stopped now. The office moved around me, someone rolling a chair, a printer coughing to life. A cough swallowed into a sleeve. Kara brushed by my cubicle and left a sticky note shaped like a speech bubble. Coffee at 2. I nodded and tucked it under my keyboard like a promise I might keep. In Lila's feed, the algorithm offered me more of her, a slow pan up a staircase at a boutique hotel, a hand shot of gold rings on manicured fingers, a caption about manifesting abundance. I shut the app and felt like I'd closed a window during a storm. I cracked my knuckles once, then opened a new email. Subject line, change in payment arrangement. To D. Whitaker, the landlord whose last name had lived rent-free on my monthly statements. The cursor blinked after Dear Mr. Whitaker waiting. I typed effective immediately. I will no longer make payments toward the rent at 1447 Juniper Unit 3B. Please direct all future billing and communications to the tenant of record, Lila Ellery. Respectfully, Grace Ellery. It looked bare. It looked right. Second email to my bank. Subject, cancel automatic transfer. I pulled the details from my spreadsheet and wrote it like a tiny contract clearing the recurring $750 scheduled for the first of each month. Third email to my parents and Lila. Subject: financial boundaries effective immediately. In the body, I pasted the spreadsheet, tightened the columns, added the total at the top in bold. Beneath it, I wrote, "This arrangement ends today. I am not available for discussion. Please respect my decision." I reread all three. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, ready to send. The office air felt colder, like the building sensed a change in pressure. I looked at the orange bear one last time, then back at the total two small suns on my desk, each burning for different reasons. I inhaled and held it. The cursor hung above the button that would unmake a pattern older than my adult life. My thumb trembled traitor to the steadiness in my chest. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked shut. I exhaled and lowered my hand so close to send, and paused there, the distance between who I had been and who I might be measured in a millimeter of air. It was 4:57 a.m. when I stopped editing the same sentence for the fifth time. The cursor blinked at me, patient and steady, as if it knew what came next. Outside my window, the city still slept, streetlights burning dim halos through a low Portland mist. My apartment was the only thing awake, the glow of my laptop painting my hands in sterile light. I reread each email one last time, line by line, making sure the tone was right, factual, polite, and irreversible. The first was addressed to Mr. Whitaker, Leela's landlord. Dear Mr. Whitaker, I'm writing to inform you that effective immediately, I will no longer be making payments toward the rent at 1447 Juniper Street, Unit 3B. Please direct all future communication regarding this property to the tenant, Lila Ellery. Respectfully, Grace Ellery. Short, clinical, no room for misinterpretation. I read it aloud once, the way you read a confession before setting it on fire. The second was to my bank. I listed the account number, the payment ID, the exact amount, $750, on the first of each month. I added one sentence that made my pulse slow with finality. Cancel this transfer, effective immediately, and confirm via reply. I copied the customer support email for good measure. The third message sat heavier than the rest. It wasn't the money that made it heavy. It was the truth. Subject line: financial boundaries, effective immediately. I attached the spreadsheet with every dollar labeled, every transfer time-stamped. In the body, I wrote, over the past 3 years, I've provided $36,120 in financial support. This arrangement ends today. I'm not available for negotiation or discussion. Please respect my decision. I ended it with my full name typed in a steady hand that didn't feel like mine. I took a breath that felt like the first one in years and pressed send. The soft whoosh of the outgoing mail made a sound like liberation, 3 notes in a quiet symphony. The first email went, then the second, then the third. The silence afterward was absolute. No fireworks, no applause, just stillness, the kind that comes after a decision you can't unsend. I sat back in my chair, the edge biting into my shoulder blades. For a moment, I felt weightless, almost giddy. Then the adrenaline hit. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden emptiness that follows release. I stood moving through my kitchen on autopilot. Coffee grounds filter water. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the apartment, low and constant, grounding me to the floor beneath my bare feet. When I poured the first cup, it tasted like something earned. I carried it to the window, letting the steam fog the glass, as the sky paled from graphite to soft gray. Somewhere in the distance, a garbage truck rumbled. I watched the blinking taillights fade, and thought that's what it feels like to take your life back. Slow, loud, and entirely ordinary. My phone lit up with the first vibration at 5:12 a.m. Unknown number, then another, then Mom, then Dad, then Lila. I turned it face down. The messages began piling in, notifications stacking like snowdrifts, voicemails, texts, group chat, pings. Each vibration was a ripple from the explosion I'd just set off. By 6:00, I'd muted my notifications. The world could shout all it wanted. I wasn't answering. I grabbed my bag, slipped on my worn coat, and stepped into the pre-dawn chill. My apartment building smelled faintly of detergent and rain. I drove to the cafe that opened early downtown, the one with baristas who never ask questions, and ordered the most expensive latte on the menu. For once, I didn't check the balance before swiping my card. On impulse, I crossed the street to the electronics store, the same one from the Facebook photo. The windows were still dark, except for a faint reflection of myself in the glass tired eyes. Messy bun posture, upright for the first time in months. I waited until the door unlocked at 7 sharp. The young clerk smiled automatically. "Can I help you find something?" "Yes," I said, voice calm, almost serene. "The XPS 17i9 processor, 32 gigs of RAM." He nodded, tapping on his tablet. "Excellent choice." I almost laughed. He didn't know that those words, "excellent choice," felt like a benediction. He boxed the laptop, slid it across the counter, and read the total. I paid in full, no financing, no hesitation. Cash. The bills felt like an offering to the version of myself I'd kept waiting too long. Walking back to my car, the morning had brightened into a soft drizzle. I carried the bag like something sacred. I imagined the next email I'd get from my parents, the ones that would use words like disappointed and ungrateful. They'd tell themselves they were the victims of my boundaries. Let them. I had proof otherwise in numbers and receipts. When I got home, I unboxed the laptop on my kitchen table. The screen reflected my face as it booted up, cool blue light filling the small space. I thought of Lila tearing into her birthday, rapping Mom's caption, the only one worth celebrating. I ran a hand over the smooth metal surface and whispered, "Happy birthday to me." I didn't check my phone until the coffee had gone cold. There were 14 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and a river of texts. I scrolled without reading the words, blurring into a single pulse of outrage. "How could you do this? You're cruel. Your sister's crying. We'll talk later. Call us right now." I placed the phone down again, palm flat on the table, breathing through the urge to explain myself. That was the old reflex, to justify, to soothe, to fix. But this new calm felt heavier and truer, like the quiet of a locked door. The voicemails came next, automatic playback, filling the room with familiar tones. Mom's voice first, trembling with controlled fury. "Grace, sweetheart, this is really not the way to handle things. We could have talked about this." Dad's next, guilt soft as honey. "You've always been so dependable, kiddo. Don't let a misunderstanding ruin that." The third was Lila, sniffling, then snapping mid-sentence. "How could you do this to family? You know I'm barely holding it together. You don't care if I lose my place, do you? You don't care about anyone but yourself." I hit delete before she could finish. For a moment, the quiet returned, dense and electric. I sipped what was left of the coffee, bitter and perfect. My hands were steady now. I leaned back, closing my eyes, feeling the new laptop's hum vibrate through the table. There was fear in me still, yes, but it had changed shape. It no longer belonged to them. It was the fear of the open road, the cliff's edge, the second before flight. My phone vibrated again. This time I didn't mute it. I looked down at the screen. The name flashing across it was Lila. The sound filled the apartment, one long, insistent ring that refused to fade. I let it go once, twice. Then I picked it up, holding it just long enough to hear the first words before ending the call. Her voice cracked with sobs, furious and raw. "How could you do this to family?" I didn't answer. The call disconnected itself, leaving a silence that felt like triumph. By the time I reached my desk the next morning, my phone had become a battlefield. 78 unread messages. The family group chat, one that had been a ghost town for years, was suddenly alive like a siren. Mom's name dominated the thread, followed by cousins, aunts, the occasional uncle who'd never remembered my birthday. The texts piled in fast, overlapping like waves. "You're cruel. Family helps family. What kind of daughter does this? Ungrateful isn't even the word." Then a string from Aunt Denise, queen of passive aggression, I guess. Some people think independence means selfishness now. I didn't reply. I didn't even open half of them. I swiped left, hit mute notifications for 8 hours, and watched the screen fall silent. The absence of vibration felt like oxygen returning to a room. The day outside was wet and gray, Portland's default setting. I tucked my coat around me and walked the 3 blocks to the office, coffee in hand, feeling strangely light. Every step forward felt like a small rebellion, proof that the world kept moving even after a family storm. Inside, fluorescent light buzzed above neat cubicles. The hum of keyboards, the smell of espresso, the faint trace of someone's too strong perfume. It all felt almost holy in its normalcy. I dropped my bag by my chair, booted up my laptop, and prepared for the flood of work emails that mercifully had nothing to do with bloodlines. At 10:17 a.m., I stood to refill my mug. When I turned, a chorus of voices shouted, "Surprise!" Kara, with her perpetually crooked bun, stood front and center holding a cupcake the size of a baseball. Someone had stuck a pink candle in the middle, leaning slightly to the left. The rest of the department was gathered behind her, grinning sheepishly. "We're a day late," she said, cheeks pink. "But happy birthday, Grace!" The cupcake was chocolate with a swirl of buttercream so tall it looked architectural. I laughed, a real laugh, sharp and startled. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone surprised me without expecting anything in return. "Make a wish," someone called from the back. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't need to. I just blew out the candle and smiled, the smoke curling between us like something gentle. They sang off-key, awkward, perfect, and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card for the cafe downstairs and a handwritten note from the team. "You're the calm in the chaos. Don't ever change." The words hit harder than I expected. I slipped the card into my pocket, muttered something about getting emotional, and turned back to my desk. The frosting was too sweet, the candle wax still warm, but the gesture filled a space I hadn't realized was hollow. Across from me, Kara grinned. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, meaning it. "Just surprised." She shrugged. "You're easy to forget in a good way, you know, like you handle everything quietly. But we see it." I nodded, pretending to fuss with my keyboard because I didn't trust my voice. When lunch rolled around, I checked my phone again. The group chat was still on fire. I scrolled absently, "Your sister's crying nonstop. You embarrassed this family. Money isn't everything, Grace. Do you even have a heart?" One from Dad. Softer, but more dangerous. "We'll talk tonight. Don't make this worse." I locked the screen and left the phone face down. My reflection in the dark monitor looked unfamiliar, calm, focused, slightly older. At 3 o'clock, my office phone rang. The number flashed unknown local. I hesitated before answering. Grace Ellery speaking. "Ah, Ms. Ellery." The voice was smooth, courteous, and immediately recognizable. "This is Mr. Whitaker. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "No, go ahead." He cleared his throat. "I received your email this morning, and I wanted to confirm that I understood correctly. You'll no longer be making rent payments for your sister." "That's correct," I said. "I see." A pause, stretched out, filled with polite discomfort. "It's just that Miss Ellery seemed unaware of this arrangement ending." "That's between you and her now," I replied evenly. "You'll need to deal with Lila directly." There was another silence, then a quiet sigh of resignation. "Understood. I'll reach out to her. Thank you for clarifying, Ms. Ellery." "Of course. Have a good afternoon." When I hung up, my hands didn't shake. I felt the same way I do after finishing a complicated project, a mixture of exhaustion and pride. For 3 years, this man had thanked me for my reliability. Today, he'd thanked me for something better, a boundary. By the time I packed up that evening, my phone had gone mercifully still. The muted thread remained unread, a digital bonfire burning itself out. I walked home through light drizzle streetlights shimmering on puddled asphalt. The world looked ordinary again, which somehow made everything extraordinary. That night I made dinner, an actual one, not from a box. Pan-seared salmon, steamed broccoli, a splash of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I ate slowly, savoring the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint patter of rain against the window. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. I didn't owe an explanation. I didn't owe rent for someone else's life. The apartment felt smaller, but also truer, as if its walls had finally exhaled with me. I washed the dishes, folded the towel, and set the orange bear keychain on the counter beside my new laptop. Its faded fur looked softer in the lamplight, almost forgiving. When I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion hit like gravity. My dreams were a blur of emails and ringing phones, but even asleep, I knew none of them were mine to answer anymore. The next morning, sunlight, weak but real, spilled through the blinds. I brewed coffee, checked my calendar, and slipped into my work shoes. Routine, predictable, good. At 8:14, my desk phone rang. Not my cell, my office line. Jules, the building's security guard, was on the other end. He sounded hesitant, voice low. Grace, there's someone here asking for you. Who? She says she's your mother. He paused. She's in the lobby, and, she looks upset. The spoon clattered against my coffee mug. Of course she was. When I stepped into the lobby, the smell of rain hit first, wet, concrete, cold air, and the unmistakable perfume my mother had worn since I was 5. White linen, clean, floral, suffocating. She stood near the reception desk like a storm, pretending to be composed, beige trench coat, belted too tightly, lipstick too red, for morning, one heel tapping against the marble floor in rapid rhythm. Jules, our security guard, lingered a cautious few steps away, pretending to check his clipboard, but watching me the way someone might watch an incoming collision. Grace. Mom's voice carried across the lobby, sharp enough to make 2 receptionists glance up from their screens. We need to talk about this ridiculous email. Her tone made it sound like I'd committed tax fraud instead of ending 3 years of quiet servitude. I caught my reflection in the lobby glass, hair damp from the drizzle, shoulders, squared face calm. I looked like someone about to walk into her own courtroom. I'm at work, I said evenly. We'll talk later. No, we'll talk now. She closed the distance in 3 strides, perfume hitting like a wave. You embarrassed this family. You humiliated your sister. What's gotten into you? The question was so absurd it almost made me laugh. I glanced at the receptionists, both typing faster, pretending this wasn't happening. Let's not do this here. Then where? She demanded. Because you certainly didn't think before sending that spreadsheet to half the family. I blinked. Half the family? She faltered, realizing she'd said too much. Well, I needed advice. She backtracked quickly. You blindsided us, Grace. People are concerned. Your aunt's your father. I cut her off with a breath sharp enough to stop her mid-sentence. Outside, I said quietly, now. Her eyes flashed, but she followed as I led her through the glass doors and into the drizzle. The air was cool and wet, the street smelling faintly of coffee grounds and bus exhaust. Cars hissed by, tires slicing puddles. I stood under the awning. She didn't bother letting the rain freckle her coat in tiny dark spots that matched her rising temper. Family doesn't abandon family, she said, crossing her arms. The line came rehearsed like it had been waiting years for an audience. You were always the steady one, the one we could rely on. How can you turn your back on us now? I met her eyes. I didn't turn my back. I just stopped kneeling. Her jaw tightened. Oh, so now you're the martyr. Do you have any idea what you've done to your sister? She's in tears, Grace. She's saying you want her to be homeless. I want her to grow up. She's fragile, Mom snapped. She's been through a lot. She's 27, I said. And she's been through exactly as much as I've paid for her to go through. The drizzle thickened into rain, tapping rhythmically against the awning above us. A man smoking nearby turned slightly away, pretending not to listen but failing miserably. I didn't care. Mom shook her head, her tone softening in that manipulative way that once worked like hypnosis. Sweetheart, I know you're under pressure, work bills being on your own. Don't, I interrupted. Don't turn this into concern. This isn't about my stress level. It's about accountability. She exhaled sharply, fogging the cool air between us. I raised you better than this. That's the problem, I said. Her eyes widened just slightly. I could almost see her recalibrating, sifting through which tactic to use next. The performance resumed quieter this time, pleading. You're angry right now, I get that. But punishing your sister doesn't fix anything. It just makes you cruel. There it was, the word she'd used my entire life when I dared to ask for fairness. Cruel for not sharing, cruel for questioning, cruel for wanting something of my own. I crossed my arms, matching her posture. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just returning responsibility to its rightful owner. Her mouth opened closed. And what you think cutting everyone off makes you strong. That's not strength, Grace. That's selfishness. A bus roared past, drowning her words for a second. I let the sound fill the space, washing the heat out of the argument until only clarity remained. Here's what's going to happen, I said when the street quieted again. My voice surprised me. Steady, low, final. We're going to talk properly tonight. 6 o'clock. At my apartment. She blinked. Excuse me. Bring Dad. Bring Lila. We'll go over everything. No surprises. No phone calls. No grandstanding. My home. My rules. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the rain ticking against the metal awning. Her face flickered between disbelief and offense, two expressions she'd never had to hold at once before. Grace, she said, her voice tight, you don't summon your parents like employees. I just did. I said simply. Color rose in her cheeks. You really think you're in control here, don't you? I think I'm finally not controlled, I said. She stared at me for a long moment, searching for the version of me she could still manage. But the silence between us didn't give her a foothold. The old rhythm, her speaking me softening her winning, was gone. Finally, she stepped back, smoothing a hand over her rain-damp hair. You've changed, she said, voice trembling just enough to pass for sadness. Yes, I said. That's the point. She looked toward the glass doors where Jules hovered uncertainly by his desk phone. You're making a scene, she hissed. Then maybe you shouldn't have come to my workplace, I said. Her eyes narrowed, sharp and shining. You'll regret this tone, young lady. I almost smiled at the phrase. It sounded antique, something left over from a script that had expired years ago. See you at 6, I said instead, stepping backward toward the door. I'm not promising to bring your father, she said. He's upset. So am I said. We'll manage. The automatic doors slid open behind me, washing warm air over my back. She stood there, small under the weight of the rain, clutching her handbag like a weapon she couldn't quite wield. Grace, she called as I crossed the threshold. This isn't who we raised you to be. I paused, one hand still on the glass door. For a moment I saw us reflected together, her rigid, polished outline beside my soaked hair and tired eyes. The symmetry of it was almost poetic. I met her gaze through the reflection the first time I'd ever done it without flinching. No, I said quietly, voice clear as glass. It's who I'm choosing to be now. The door sealed shut between us with a soft hiss, and for the first time in my life, the sound of my mother's heels clicking away felt like freedom. They arrived 5 minutes early, the way people do when they want to look like they're in control. The doorbell rang once, sharp and insistent. I'd already moved the coffee table aside to make room, rearranged the 3 mismatched chairs so they faced the bare wall. My apartment wasn't designed for confrontation. It was built for quiet, for small dinners and solitude. But tonight it would do. I opened the door. Dad came first, broad-shouldered, damp from the rain. His coat smelled faintly of wet wool and aftershave. Behind him, Mom swept in like she owned the place, scanning the room as if taking inventory. Lila trailed last, her eyes' red cheeks flushed beneath careful makeup. She wore the cream trench coat from her Phoenix photos, the one she'd tagged, Ashta blessed, while I'd been paying her overdue rent. Water, I offered. No one answered. They moved as a single organism, Dad standing near the wall, Mom pacing Lila, sinking onto the love seat, arms folded like a shield. Grace, Mom began tone-clipped, "This entire spectacle is unnecessary." I ignored her, crossing to my desk in the corner. The projector hummed softly as it powered up, throwing a pale blue glow onto the empty wall. "What is that?" she asked. "Context," I said. The first image filled the space, a screenshot of a payment record. Clean lines, black font on white background. Payment to D. Whitaker, $750, recurring 40 months. I spoke quietly, like reading a weather report. "This is the rent I've been paying for Lila's apartment, 40 months total, $30,000. Mom's face hardened. "We already know that." "You knew parts," I said, clicking the remote. Another slide appeared. Bank transfers labeled car repairs, medical bills, utilities, urgent. "You didn't know the totals. These add another $6,120. Grand total, $36,120. Dad rubbed his temple. "Grace, this isn't." I kept going. "These payments began in March 2021. They were meant to last 3 months until Lila found work. She's had 4 jobs since then." I clicked again. The next slide showed a termination email, reason excessive absences. Another failure to meet performance expectations. Each date lined up neatly beside a corresponding rent transfer. Lila's voice cracked high and brittle. "You went through my emails." "They were forwarded to me," I said. "Each time you listed my address as your secondary contact. HR correspondence, billing issues, even your vacation approvals." Mom crossed her arms. "You didn't have to humiliate her like this." "This isn't humiliation," I said. "It's transparency." I advanced to the next slide, a series of Instagram photos. Lila at Camelback Mountain, drink in hand. Lila in Napa Lila with designer bags. Lila in that same cream coat. Beneath each post, the date and caption glowed like an indictment. I'd added small yellow boxes with the payment transfers from those weeks. $900, emergency rent $600, medical expense $480, car issue. The wall glowed with evidence, digital, undeniable, bright against the beige paint. Lila shot up from the love seat, voice trembling. "This is insane. You're stalking me." I turned to her, calm. "No, I'm just keeping records. Because every time I asked for accountability, I was told I was imagining things." Mom took a step forward. "Enough. We are not here for some PowerPoint trial. You've made your point." "Not yet," I said and clicked again. The next image was my retirement balance, $4,900. Underneath it, my savings, $6,480. And next to that, the spreadsheet total, $36,120. "This," I said, "is the cost of being the reliable one, the one who doesn't need help, the one who gets told to be patient while her sister stabilizes." The room went silent, except for the soft whir of the projector. Dad shifted, eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't realize." His voice trailed off, quiet as a confession. "No, I said you didn't. You didn't want to." Lila sank back onto the love seat, her defiance cracked just slightly. "I didn't ask you to do all this." I met her eyes. "You didn't have to. You just let it happen." She looked away. The silence swelled again, thicker this time. The glow from the projector painted the wall. In sterile light, the room transformed into a courtroom no one wanted to enter. Mom's voice came next, brittle but still sharp. "You could have talked to us first. We're family. We would have worked something out." "I did talk," I said, turning to her. "For years. I said I couldn't keep paying. I said I was falling behind. And every time you called me ungrateful or selfish. Do you remember?" Her lips pressed together, the faintest flinch in her eyes. "Family helps. Family," she said weakly. "Exactly," I replied. I helped. I helped until I couldn't breathe." I clicked to the next image. A collage of every thank you text from Lila over the years, brief, casual, always transactional. You're a lifesaver. Got it, sis. Promise I'll pay you back when I can. The last slide was blank, save for a line of text in black font. What did it cost? The words hung there heavy and cold. Dad cleared his throat. Grace, I had no idea it was that bad. His eyes flicked to the wall, then back to me. I thought you were doing fine. You never complained. I did? I said quietly. You just stopped listening. He nodded slowly, the truth settling in his face like gravity. The mask of good-natured ignorance cracked. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Lila had stopped crying. Her mascara had smudged into faint gray arcs beneath her eyes. She stared at the wall, then down at her lap, then at me. Her voice was small, almost childlike. So what now? Now, I said, turning off the projector. You figure out how to pay your own rent? Mom bristled. Grace, that's not fair. Fair, I repeated. Do you know how many times you've said that word when it benefited you? Fair was me covering her bills so you could sleep at night. Fair was me sacrificing so she didn't have to. I'm done playing fair. I unplugged the projector cord. The room dimmed back into its natural light, warm, muted, human. I turned to face them. I didn't invite you here to argue, I said. I invited you to understand. Mom's arms dropped to her sides, the energy draining out of her. What do you want from us, Grace? Nothing, I said. That's the point. The words seemed to land like a physical blow. For the first time, Dad didn't rush to smooth things over. He sat back, exhaling slowly. Maybe she's right, he said, voice low. Mom spun toward him. Robert. He didn't flinch. We've leaned on her too much. I can see that now. Lila sniffed, wiping under her eyes. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I said, not unkindly. But you can stop now. Her shoulders sagged. The fight left her posture replaced by something that looked almost like understanding, or maybe just defeat. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The rain outside tapped softly against the window, steady and unbroken. Dad stood, his voice gentler this time. What happens next? Grace? I looked at him for a long moment before answering. What happens next is that I live my life. On my terms. Mom opened her mouth, but I raised a hand before she could speak. And since you're all here, I added, there's one more thing. They watched me wary. I reached into the folder on my desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I've accepted a promotion, I said. Senior Operations Lead. In Boston. Dad blinked. Boston, I leave in 4 weeks. The words landed in the center of the room like a dropped match. Mom's voice rose sharp again. You're running away! No, I said, calm and steady. I'm finally walking towards something. Lila looked up at me, then eyes-wide realization dawning that her safety net was leaving the city and her. The rain hit harder against the window, as if marking the moment. None of them spoke. Not right away. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector cooling down, a mechanical sigh after too much heat. I stood in the silence and waited for it to settle, for the truth to fill every corner of the room. Boston wasn't an escape. It was proof. And they could see it now, glowing in the dark behind me, the faint reflection of their own faces on the blank wall, looking at the space where the evidence had been. Mom was the first to break the silence, her voice rising like steam from a pot about to boil over. So this is it, she said. You're choosing money over blood. I turned toward her steady. It's not about money, I said. It's about respect. Her eyes narrowed. Respect. We gave you everything. You gave me expectations. I interrupted. Obligations. A script I never auditioned for. Lila shifted on the love seat, her fingers twisting the hem of her coat. You're making this sound so simple, Grace. You don't understand. No, I said softly. I understand better than anyone. The air in the apartment had thickened humid with years of unspoken truths. The projector sat dark now, but the shadows it had cast still lingered ghostly remnants of evidence no one could erase. Mom took a step forward, her voice trembling with that familiar blend of guilt and accusation. Family doesn't keep score. Family doesn't exploit each other either, I said. You've always been dramatic. I laughed once low and humorless. If this were drama, Mom, it'd be fiction. Unfortunately, it's just math. Dad finally spoke, his tone cautious, almost diplomatic. Grace, your mother's just upset. You dropped a lot on us tonight. Upset is fine, I said. Defensive is predictable. Accountable would be new. Lila's breathing hitched, a small sound that cracked through the tension. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. Mom shot her a look. Lila, don't! But Lila kept talking, voice trembling. I didn't know how to stop. Every time I messed up, you said Grace could help. Every time I got scared, you said she'd figure it out. You all made it sound normal. Her words came fast now, tripping over each other. I don't know how to live without help. I don't even know where to start. For a moment, I almost felt the old reflex reach in, fix it, save her. The instinct that had built my whole adult life like scaffolding around her fragility. But something inside me stayed still, this time solid as bedrock. Then you learn, I said quietly. Like I did. Lila looked at me as if she didn't recognize my face. You make it sound easy. It isn't, I said. It's hell sometimes, but it's real. The silence that followed was a living thing filling every inch of the small apartment. Even the rain outside seemed to have stopped, leaving only the low hum of the fridge and the faint static of the projector cooling down. Mom turned to Dad, searching for an ally. Robert, say something. He didn't look at her. He was staring at the blank wall, eyes distant. She's right, he said, finally, voice rough. Mom blinked, stunned. What? She's right, he repeated slower now, like each word cost him something. I've failed both of them. Lila's head snapped toward him. Dad! He lifted a hand. No, let me finish. He looked at me, then eyes heavy but clear. I let your mother set the tone. I told myself I was keeping peace, but really I was just avoiding guilt. I thought if I stayed out of it, it would balance itself, but it never did. Mom's face hardened, her mouth a tight line. Robert, don't do this now, he ignored her. I should have stepped in years ago. When you got that award senior year and no one showed up. When Lila took your savings for that photography class and you said it was fine. I told myself you didn't need us the way she did. That was easier to believe than admitting we were lazy parents. The words hit me like a tide, soft, relentless, undeniable. My throat tightened, but I stayed still. He rubbed the back of his neck. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now. All of it. For the first time in my memory, he looked smaller, not weak, but human. Lila wiped her face with her sleeve. So what happens now? I get punished? I get cut off? No, I said. You get boundaries. There's a difference. Mom scoffed. Boundaries. You sound like your therapist. Maybe, I said, meeting her gaze. But she's the first person who's ever told me I was allowed to have them. I turned back to Lila. If you want help, it comes with conditions. Her voice wavered. Like what? Like a real job, I said. Not freelance gigs or short-term contracts. A job with a contract I can verify. A working budget you stick to. And therapy, both of you. Mom bristled. Excuse me? You heard me, I said. You and Dad. You've both been living in the same pattern for decades. You need to unlearn it. So does she. Lila swallowed hard. And if I don't, then you figure it out without me, I said. That's what adulthood looks like. The words didn't come from anger. They came from clarity, like light cutting through fog. Dad nodded slowly. That's fair. He looked at me again. That's more than fair. Mom crossed her arms, but her voice had lost its edge. And what about you, Grace? You think moving across the country will fix everything? No, I said. I think fixing myself did. Boston's just the next chapter. Her expression faltered, a flicker of uncertainty behind the pride. Lila leaned forward, elbows on her knees. I'll try, she said. The job, the budget, whatever. I'll try. I believed her not completely, but enough. Good, I said. That's all I ever wanted. For the first time all evening, the tension broke, not with a smile or a hug, but with quiet acceptance. The rain started again outside, a slow patter against the window, like punctuation. Mom moved to speak, then stopped. She looked at Dad, then at me, her mouth opening and closing once before she turned away. The silence she left behind was louder than her usual disapproval. Dad stood, then stepping toward me. For a heartbeat, I thought he was leaving, but instead he reached out, hesitant, almost awkward, and pulled me into a hug. It wasn't the perfunctory half-pat embrace of past birthdays or holidays. It was real, weighted, his chest shaking just slightly against mine. I'm proud of you, he said, voice breaking. I should have said that a long time ago. My arms lifted slowly, returning the hug. Thank you, I whispered. When we let go, he wiped at his eyes, embarrassed. Behind him, Mom stood very still, her face unreadable. The light from the window caught the edge of her cheekbone, tracing a line between anger and something like awe. For once, she didn't speak. She just watched, silent and shaken, as the old order of our family quietly, irrevocably broke. The apartment looked different in boxes, quiet, skeletal, almost weightless. I stacked each carton by category: kitchen books, clothes, neat handwriting, small labels, the language of control. The walls bore faint outlines where framed photos had hung sun shadows in the shape of a former life. Every sound echoed, now the scrape of tape, the thud of a folded sweater, the whisper of air moving through a space that was no longer mine. I worked slowly, deliberately. Each item carried a question. Do I need this, or does it just remind me who they wanted me to be? The orange bear keychain went into the keep pile, not out of sentiment, but acknowledgement. It wasn't a wound anymore, it was proof of healing. The red mug from Mom's family brunch set went into a donation box. The wool coat I'd patched for 6 winters I kept. It had earned its place beside me. When I reached the last drawer of my desk, I found the envelope I'd nearly forgotten, a stack of bank statements folded neatly, the record of all those transfers. I hesitated only a second before feeding them into the shredder. The motor hummed softly, a mechanical exorcism. When it stopped, I exhaled and smiled. The moving truck arrived 2 days later. 2 men with tattooed forearms and efficient silence loaded my life into a metal box. I left the apartment key on the counter, locked the door, and walked down the stairs without looking back. My childhood home was 20 minutes away, but it felt like another country. The lawn was freshly mowed, the porch light still burned the same weak yellow it always had. The curtains were open. For a moment, I thought I saw my younger self inside, hair braided tight, standing at the window waiting for someone to say, "Good job, Grace." When I knocked, Dad opened the door. His face softened when he saw me. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," I said. Mom wasn't there. She'd gone to run errands, which probably meant avoiding the moment. The house smelled the same, citrus cleaner and coffee gone cold. The furniture looked smaller, the rooms tighter, as if shrinking now that I'd outgrown them. "I'm heading out tomorrow," I said, stepping into the living room. He nodded. "Boston, right?" "Still doesn't feel real. Not to me either." We stood there, surrounded by the echoes of everything unspoken. The walls were lined with family photos, graduations, birthdays, holidays, where smiles had been required like dress codes. I stopped in front of one from my 12th birthday. Lila had frosting on her nose. Mom was mid-laugh. I was off to the side, holding the cake knife half out of frame. "You can take some if you want," Dad said quietly. "No," I said. "They belong here." He studied me a moment longer, then sighed. You really are like your grandmother. Once you decide there's no stopping you. That's not a bad thing. No, he said softly. It's not. We walked through the house together, his idea of goodbye. The old banister creaked under our hands, the kitchen tiles still chipped near the fridge, the same spot Mom used to tell us not to run barefoot over. Each step felt like shedding a skin I didn't need anymore. When we reached the doorway, Dad handed me a small box. Your mother wanted you to have this, he said, almost apologetic. Inside was the family photo from our last Christmas together, before the fights, before the resentment calcified. I traced the glass, surprised to feel no anger, only distance. Tell her I said thank you, I said. He nodded, eyes shining. Take care of yourself, Gracie. I will. I said, you too. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cold and clean. As I drove away, the house receded in the rearview mirror until it became nothing but a pale square at the end of a familiar road. Boston arrived in fragment skyscrapers like glass teeth cranes stretching toward a gray winter sky, the hum of traffic that never quite slept. My new apartment was small but bright sunlight pooling on hardwood like it was trying to welcome me. The boxes I'd brought seemed fewer here, like proof that I'd left the right things behind. I bought a rug, a secondhand bookshelf, a single plant that might live or die, but at least depended on no one but me. My first night there, I stood at the window, the skyline blinking faintly across the river, and whispered the word that had once sounded impossible: free. Weeks folded into months. I found a rhythm: early mornings with coffee, evening walks along the Charles therapy sessions every Thursday. Dr. Patel never used the word revenge. She called it reclamation. You didn't burn bridges, she said once. You just stopped letting people walk across you to get where they wanted. At work, I led my first project team. My new colleagues saw me as competent, not convenient. My paycheck was mine alone, my weekends uninterrupted by emergencies that weren't mine to fix. I bought a second mug. It felt symbolic, somehow enough space for another person should one ever belong in my life, but not waiting for it. Time passed the way healing does, imperceptibly, then all at once. 1 year later, I woke to sunlight slicing across the Boston skyline. My 32nd birthday. The air smelled faintly of rain and new coffee from the corner cafe downstairs. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, the wood floor warm beneath my feet, the city alive beneath my window. On the counter sat the wooden box I'd brought with me, the orange bear keychain resting inside. I opened the lid, touched its worn fur, and smiled, not with irony or pain, but peace. My phone buzzed then, vibrating softly against the counter. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Dad. I stared at it for a heartbeat before answering, sunlight glinting off the skyline like the start of something uncharted. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and cardamom, an unfamiliar sweetness that made the small Boston apartment feel more like home than anywhere else ever had. Fairy lights draped lazily across the bookshelf, twinkling against the rows of paperbacks and half-bloomed plants I hadn't killed yet. A cake from the bakery down the street sat on the counter, simple white frosting dusted with gold flakes, Appy 32. Grace, written in looping handwriting that didn't try too hard. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell chimed. I opened it to find my cousin Tamsin, arms full of takeout bags and her usual grin. If I know you, she said, you forgot dinner. Not forgot, I said, taking the bags from her. Delegated. Behind her came 2 of my coworkers, Kara from Portland, by way of a new transfer, and Samir from accounting, carrying a bouquet of slightly wilted tulips and an expensive bottle of wine. We figured birthday people shouldn't have to pour their own drinks, he said, setting the bottle down like an offering. By 7, the apartment was alive with noise, laughter echoing off the walls, the smell of Thai food mingling with candle wax, the faint hum of jazz from a small Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't a big party. It didn't need to be. These were people who knew me not through shared obligation, but through choice. Tamsin raised her glass first. To Grace, she said, voice firm, teasing only at the edges. For finally being the main character. Everyone laughed, even me. The sound was easy this time. Later, when the food was gone and the cake half eaten, Kara nudged me toward the couch. So she said, "Is this your favorite birthday yet?" I thought about it. About all the ones before: quiet dinners, forgotten last-minute cards, phone calls that turned into requests for help. The answer came out without hesitation. "Yes," I said. "By far." She smiled. "Good. You earned it." Around 8, my laptop pinged with a video call. The contact name made my breath hitch. "Dad." "Go on," Tamsin whispered. "We'll handle cleanup." I clicked accept. His face filled the screen, older, a little thinner, but smiling in a way that looked real. Behind him, I recognized the old living room, though a few things were different. The framed photos rearranged, the coffee table cleared, the desk finally assembled after years of promises. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he said. "Thanks, Dad." He looked sheepish. "Got your card, I did." The bookstore gift card was perfect. He exhaled like that had been a test. "Good. I figured cash was impersonal, but a card was too small." "It's exactly right," I said, and meant it. We talked for a while about Boston, about work, about the new Thai place he'd tried in Portland. "Not as good as yours, but close." Then his tone shifted, softening. "I want you to know," he said, "I really am proud of you, Grace. Not just for the job or the move, for standing up for yourself, for changing what needed to change." The words landed quietly but deeply. A warmth spread through my chest. Not fireworks, not tears, just the steady heat of something repaired. "Thanks, Dad," I said. "That means more than you think." He nodded, eyes glinting. "We're getting there, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "We are." He hesitated before continuing. "Your sister's doing better, you know. 4 months at the pharmacy now. Her manager says she hasn't missed a shift." "That's good," I said. And it was. "She's finishing those bookkeeping classes next month, says she wants to get certified." I smiled faintly. That sounds like her finally putting that creative brain to work. He chuckled. "She asked me not to tell you yet, but I figured you'd want to know. There's still distance, but it's healthier now. We're learning." For once, I didn't feel the need to analyze it. I just nodded. "I'm glad." We said our goodbyes, no guilt, no hidden requests. Just a simple "love you, kiddo," and a wave before the screen went black. When I turned around, Tamsin was watching me from the kitchen doorway, a towel slung over her shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Better than okay." She smiled, then pointed to the countertop. "Text from your mom came through while you were talking. Didn't read it." I picked up my phone. The message preview read, "Happy birthday, Grace. Hope Boston's treating you well." Mom, that was it. No emojis, no disclaimers, no manipulation, just acknowledgement. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Thank you." It is. The simplicity of it felt revolutionary. By 9, the others had filtered out, leaving me and Tamsin to finish the last of the wine. We sat on the couch, the city humming faintly outside, and watched the reflection of the fairy lights ripple in the window glass. "Feels peaceful," she said. "It is. Not lonely." "No," I said. "For the first time, it's just quiet. The good kind." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You built this life, you know, brick by brick." "I know," I whispered. After she left, I tidied up the small rituals that marked ownership of a space. Washed the plates, blew out the candles, folded the throw blanket across the couch. The apartment settled around me, warm and still. On the counter, my laptop pinged again, a single notification that cut through the quiet. I walked over and saw the name in my inbox, Lila Ellery. Subject line, "Your day." I didn't open it. Not yet. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes left of my 32nd birthday. The cake was half gone, the wine bottle empty. The city lights smudged against the window like paint. I ran a finger over the wooden box on my desk, tracing the grain, feeling the familiar weight of calm. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere distant, fading fast. Inside, the air was still and steady. I closed my laptop and smiled. Whatever that email held, apology, gratitude, maybe both, I'd meet it in the morning. Tonight belonged to peace. The unread message sat there quietly glowing in the dark, like a small waiting star. Morning light slid through the blinds in thin gold ribbons, softening everything. It touched the mug on the counter, the spine of a half-read book, the faint ring left by last night's wine glass. Boston was waking up beneath me, all sound and motion. Distant horns, the bark of a dog, the low hum of a city stretching into another day. I sat at the desk with my coffee, the screen in front of me glowing faintly. The email still waited there, unopened, from Lila Ellery, your day. I hovered for a second, heart steady this time. Not dread, not curiosity, just readiness. I clicked. Happy birthday, Grace. I've been thinking a lot about last year, and all the years before. I took advantage of you because it was easier than standing on my own. You made it too easy. I think part of me expected you to keep saving me forever. I'm not proud of that. I'm trying to do better now. I know an apology doesn't fix it, but maybe it's a start. I hope Boston's everything you wanted. Lila. I read it twice. The first time through, I scanned for manipulation, old instincts dying hard. But there was none, just honesty, clean and fragile as glass. On the second read, I felt the faintest tug in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. She had finally stepped onto her own side of the bridge. I clicked reply. My fingers rested over the keys for a moment before the words came. Hi, Lila. Thank you for writing. I know that wasn't easy. I'm glad you're trying, and I hope you keep going. I'm rooting for your progress from a distance. Take care of yourself. Grace. I hit send, watched the message whoosh away, and waited for the familiar aftershock that used to follow every family exchange. But nothing came. Just quiet. The good kind. The city outside glowed in soft yellows and silvers. Across the street, a woman walked her dog, both of them bundled against the chill. Two boys pedaled past on bikes, laughing so hard one nearly lost his balance. The sound made me smile. I stood stretched and crossed to the small wooden box on the shelf. The box was simple cherrywood corners worn smooth from being opened and closed over the years. Inside, tucked neatly beneath a folded letter from my grandmother, lay the orange bear keychain. Its fur was nearly threadbare now, one plastic eye cloudy, the other gleaming stubbornly in the light. I picked it up, turning it over in my palm. Once it had been a symbol of everything I'd lost: attention, fairness, a place in my own family story. Now it just looked small. Human. I thought about the years it had spent dangling from my backpack. My keys, my monitor, quiet witness to every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. Every compromise disguised as kindness. Every act of care that cost me a little more of myself. I didn't hate it anymore. I didn't need to keep it out as a reminder either. I placed it gently back into the box and closed the lid with a soft click. Not a goodbye, just a closing. The apartment filled with light. I poured another cup of coffee, the rich smell curling into the air, and leaned against the window. The reflection that met me there looked older, steadier, at ease. My posture was different now, shoulders relaxed, jaw unclenched, eyes open. A year ago, I'd been counting every loss like evidence, money, time, love measured out in what I'd given away. But standing there, I realized that balance didn't always mean evening the scales. Sometimes it meant stepping off them entirely. I had built something that couldn't be tallied: a quiet morning with no crises waiting in my inbox, a life that fit like my own skin. My revenge wasn't in the emails or the confrontation or even the move. It was here, in this piece I'd carved out of the wreckage. The sunlight shifted higher, streaking across the buildings and spilling into the apartment, painting golden bars across the floor. I took a deep breath, felt the warmth on my hands, and thought of everything still ahead, days without apology. Choices made without fear, a horizon no longer defined by other people's shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang the hour. I smiled, turned from the window, and started getting ready for the day. No ceremony, no reflection needed. Just life continuing as it should. Before leaving, I paused by the box once more, resting my hand on the lid. "We're good," I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to the past or myself. Maybe both. Outside, the city pulsed awake, traffic growing louder. A coffee cart setting up on the corner, the world moving forward whether or not anyone watched. I opened the door, locked it behind me, and felt the weight of the key settle easily in my palm. For the first time, it didn't feel like something I had to carry. It felt like something I'd chosen to keep. The elevator doors slid shut, the hum of descent steady beneath my feet. When they opened again, sunlight burst across the lobby floor, gold and clean and unfiltered. I stepped into it, into the hum and rush of morning, feeling the air wrap around me like a promise. And as I crossed the street toward the day ahead, I thought, not with bitterness, but clarity. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped letting them walk across me to reach the view. And just like that, Grace's story finds its balance. No fireworks, no final showdown, just peace earned the hard way. If you felt that quiet strength, tell us in the comments what moment hit you most. We read every comment, and your stories matter here. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of justice and self-worth. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.